Okay, so hopefully you all made it through that first video. It was a lot of talking, a lot of just kind of general background in theory, but this is going to be more practical. Like, what do we do about it? And so my advice to you would be to leave your directional light as a stationary light. That way you'll have one light in your scene that casts real-time shadows, which stationary lights will. So if you have something that moves in your scene, like you have a prop that moves that's set to movable, like your skeletal mesh, something like Pandora's box, for example, when the lid opens, that will have a shadow that changes because stationary lights will cast real-time shadows that blend in seamlessly with the static shadows. And then the rest of your lights, excluding the skylight, just leave the skylight as default. But if you bring in a spotlight, a point light, or anything else, I would set those to static unless you have a good reason for them not to be. Like in the case of a lamp, that would be a good reason to have it as stationary. But otherwise, it's better to, for performance and just simplicity's sake, to have it as have these, as static. Excuse me. And yeah, it avoids a lot of other problems too. So that would be my advice. And so the thing with static though is you have to remember, anytime you change something, like if I move this block, I'm going to need to rebuild the lighting. I'll go ahead and build it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And so, like I said, it will, Unreal will give you, cast shadows in the viewport from static lights, just so you can sort of see when you're arranging them. But bear in mind that those lights, in game will need to be baked, otherwise they won't show up. So, like if I moved this block over here, you'll notice, one, that its cast shadow still exists in the scene on this mesh, and two, while there is a cast shadow here, that won't show up in the game. If I were to make a package and then play this would have no cast shadow, because this is a static object and the lighting hasn't been rebuilt. We would need to rebuild the lighting in order for, one, this to go away, and two, this to actually have a shadow in game. So just bear that in mind. Anytime you're, when you're about to turn your stuff in, or anytime you're about to view it in the headset, it's always a good idea to just really quickly bake the lighting. And to that end, I'm going to ask that you guys bring in one more volume. We're going to bring into the scene what's called a light mass importance volume. And then we're going to scale it basically like we did with our nav mesh stuff. We're going to scale this guy to basically enclose our entire scene. And this is just one lighting specific volume that helps with quality and baking performance, I guess is the best way to put it. Anything, so like our nav mesh volume, anything within this volume gets special attention with lighting, and anything outside of it doesn't get that special attention, which kind of speeds up the baking process because it doesn't have to worry as much about the stuff on the outside, and it increases the quality of what's baked inside of it. So it's kind of a win-win. So for your scene, I'd like you guys to bring in the light mass importance volume. And then, and again, remember to bake your lighting before you view it, or especially before you turn it in. And so there's a couple of things that I kind of wanted to go over now. So I hopefully that mostly makes sense. If you guys have questions, obviously you can ask me or email me. But I think that's sort of like the basics of what I think you need to worry about for lighting And I think I would summarize it as keep your directional light set to stationary. Any other lights you bring into the scene, set them to static unless you have a specific need for those to not be static. And so let's kind of go over a couple of things that might be issues for you guys, and then we'll see if we can solve them. First, you probably noticed that these shadows are really kind of mushy, and that when we move these blocks, the real-time shadows are actually look better, sharper. And that, if you guys notice that sort of thing, in this case, it's probably true case in your situation too. It's because of the low resolution of the texture that's being baked for the lighting on this plane. And so what we can do to solve that is select the plane, and we're going to go into the details panel and we're going to look for lighting. And then what we can do is override light map resolution. So this will default to being off. Go ahead and turn it on. And what this does, on an object by object basis in your scene, you can set the resolution of the light map texture. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bump this up. Let's say like 512. We're going to keep it powers of 2, and we talked about that for textures. And then we're going to rebuild the lighting. So just be aware that bumping up the texture sizes will increase the build time a little bit. But we didn't bump it up that much. And now you notice that the textures are way, way sharper. Second thing you guys might be interested in is having an object that is emissive, or in other words, glowing, cast that light into the scene. And that can be done. Anything that's got an emissive channel on it can light the scene, can cast static lighting into the scene. And so right now I've got a material on this sphere that is fully emissive. And you notice that it doesn't do anything, it's not lighting. And so the solution to that is to go into the details panel with that object selected. So it's something you have to do on an object basis. And then we'll go back down into lighting, and we're going to check the checkbox that says use emissive for static lighting. And we have a couple of things we can do here. We can bump up the emissive boost. I'm going to bump that up to 2, actually, and bump it up to 3. And now you notice that nothing happened. We got to rebuild the lighting because this is a static lighting feature. And now, any objects with an emissive channel will cast lighting into the scene. And then the third thing I wanted to go over that is, something that might be a problem for you guys, is when you're dealing with some geometry that is single-sided, meaning that you can see it on one side, but like it's just a flat plane, and from the other side it's transparent. If I build this, you notice this plane is not going to cast a shadow. And so what a situation that this might, you might find yourself in is if you built a house and you just built like the room of the house, and the scene takes place in the interior of this room, but the walls are all just planes. There's no geometry outside of them. So you could build geometry out there that casts shadows. But another solution is to grab your object and then use two-sided lighting. And in theory, this should light it as if it's two-sided and cause it to cast shadows as well. And that's on the object basis. You select the object and you go down into the details panel under lighting and then hit use two-sided lighting. So those are like 3 scenarios you guys might find yourselves in as you're trying to kind of fine-tune the lighting. I'm assuming you all kind of have a general understanding of how the lighting works. Like, obviously, for the individual lights. You can change the color, the intensity. For things like point lights and spotlights, you can change the fall off, etc., etc. So I don't think I need to cover that. But I think that gives you kind of at least a basic overview of how, the specifics of lighting in Unreal might apply to your final projects. If anyone has any further questions or any specific things that they need help with, definitely let me know.